Hey everyone. So we're changing things up a little bit this week. It's just me. I wanted to kind of address what this show is all about, the name, how did I come up with Mostly Together, and why I am doing this podcast. I've had a lot of questions from you guys, and I just wanted to answer some of that. So let's get into it. All right. Weird. Let's do this. Let's have a conversation with myself. Usually these happen in my head. All right. You always seem to have it together. I've heard a variation of that sentence, I feel, for most of my adult life, and I understand why now. For more than 15 years, I worked in TV news, local TV news. I woke up in some ungodly hours for most of my career when most normal people were sleeping. And I've walked onto a live set. I've delivered breaking news. I've interviewed people. I've adjusted when everything has changed without warning. And I've also usually managed to look relatively calm while doing all of that. Then I would go home to try and be a present wife, partner, mom. I'd answer the emails. I'd try and keep on top of, what was going on in the current day. I'd remember the school forms. I'd find the missing water bottle. I'd try and figure out what everyone was going to be eating for dinner. And I'd most times fail miserably at that. So yes, maybe from the outside, it looked like I had it all together. But I've learned since leaving the news that being capable is not the same thing as having everything all figured out. And that has been a very hard lesson too, because I was just used to going. There was never an off button. It was always, what more can I put onto my plate? Because I thrive in chaos. And I think that space, honestly, of taking some of the chaos out, as in what I did for a career, is kind of where this podcast came from. It's where it was born. But I did want to talk about the name of the show. We're starting to really get our reps in now with the episodes and familiarize ourselves with the audience and so many different guests. And I thought that it was important to kind of put this out here about why I chose to do this, why I chose to name the podcast Mostly Together, and why I needed to create it when I did. So because Mostly Together, it really isn't just a cutesy name, although it's certainly applicable to every single person in one time or another in their lives. I didn't just write it down one day. I was literally sitting here at this table thinking about how badly I wanted to connect with people. But yet I didn't have the news anymore to do that through. So I loved podcasts. For over a decade, I've been listening to them now. And I felt like a podcast would be great because I love to learn about people's stories. I love to connect and network and kind of create a community and safe space where we can kind of get more into the story. Because I feel like when I was in news, we were really just skimming the surface. And that was really because that was all we had time for. So your typical interview in news, I hosted a lifestyle show, co-hosted one. So it was about maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe, if it was a big interview. But even that is not adequate time, I think, to get points across and learn about a person. It was hard. I mean, we did a good job and we did what we could with the time we had. And you always make it work, the show must go on. But I feel as though it was off camera, right before the camera went on is really when I started connecting with people, finding out where they're from, what their story is, where they grew up, how they got into what they got into. And it was funny because I remember my colleagues at the time looking at me save this for the interview. But I was, you're pressed for time and you only have a certain amount of things you can talk about. And then usually more often than not, people were promoting something. So you didn't have a time to really ask those questions, which is why I just missed that. When I left news, I missed that interview setting, those intimate conversations, getting to know someone. And obviously people who have a quite impressive resume, So yeah, that's how the podcast came to be. It was me being able to continue to do what I loved and why I got into journalism. It was trying to connect and create that community, like I said. Because I think we can be deeply grateful for our lives also. and still wonder what's next. And I was really grateful for my time that I had, you know, obviously working for the news for over 15 years. I was grateful for every opportunity, even though there was this massive hole career wise that I was feeling and this grief that was starting to set in because my identity was tied so much to this public persona that I had. And I truly, to this day, I mean, I was myself. Who you saw on the news, that was who I was. I laughed a lot. I am very talkative, could talk the wallpaper off a wall. I love to sing. I don't know. I put that out there, but then I realized when I didn't have that anymore, there were so many parts of who I was that were still here. I just didn't know how I could tap into it and still do that in my own way. And again, that's how the podcast was born. And I think that now that I'm being completely honest with you, I I feel as though it was a big learning curve, trying to kind of unnews myself, in the sense that I did have some more time to ask people questions. I got I'm getting to have people on my show that I've always wanted to interview, and ask them questions that we never had time for if I did have them on, in the news setting. So yeah, it's been a huge learning curve these past, what is it? I think it's been 9 months now. And I've been learning more about myself and things are starting to come back and I'm starting to connect with even people that I haven't really connected with since I first got into the business or even right before I got into the business. And that's a really cool full circle moment, And a lot of the guests, if you've been following the show, I had someone on from high school that I didn't realize was a huge name in the CrossFit world, so it's so interesting to see the paths that we all take. And I think it's okay to, love doing what you're doing, but still feeling that, maybe there are parts of yourself that are missing. And I think that now, as I reflect back, I did love, working in the news industry, but I also realized that there were some parts of me that were missing when I was doing that. That whole life balance thing is really, really hard, I want to feel confident in one area, but it's okay if you feel completely unsure in another. We can look perfectly from the outside while quietly we're trying to understand who we're becoming. And that is what I keep saying. I feel like this show is all about coming home to myself and really realizing that I don't have to reinvent myself. The answers are literally, they lie within. You know what I mean? All I have to do is just tap into what I really love to do now that everything else is stripped away and just keep doing it. Keep enjoying those conversations, keep showing people the real side and that life is messy and we're all living in this messy middle at one time or another. We're not completely falling apart. We're mostly together. And maybe that's not the problem we need to fix either. I think that it's simply what it looks like to be a person who's still growing, right? We're all growing. We will never stop growing. Maybe sometimes your growth will be a little stunted depending on where in life you're at or if something happens to you. And I think that was a thing I was really adamant about after the news was I don't want to just stop. Although I did have to take a quick pause button. I could have gone back into the news, but did I want to? And my husband and my parents kept saying, take this breath, take this moment that the universe is literally handing to you on a silver platter that you've never gotten before, and ask yourself who you are, what it is truly you want to do. And that's all part of the reconnecting. And that's all part of the being mostly together. So I did take that pause, and I did find some things that I really connected with that I always loved, but never found the time for. Another big thing that was really funny is a lot of people, because I have 2 kids, I don't want to lose part of who I am just because I am a mom. I want to continue to build and continue on this path while I am still continuing to be a mom. Is it hard? Of course it is. Do I have my things together? No, not all the time. Not most of the time, I feel. Mostly, maybe. But I think that I can't stop. You can't stop your growth. You still have to work on who you are. And I keep saying, even though it is really hard and I have severe mom guilt and FOMO at times, I have to remind myself that my kids are looking to see the person I am and who I'm becoming still at all times. And I want them to understand that you can do things for yourself and it's not being selfish. You know what I mean? I am a human being and was before I had kids, and I had dreams and aspirations, and I still have those, and I still want to see where those take me and work on those. And that's okay. You can do both. You don't need permission. I think of all these questions that I've been answering for myself. I want to start answering them on the podcast because I feel like so many people I've been chatting with have gone through these periods where something unexpected happens and you really have to pivot and figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? Who am I? So that's kind of how that all came about and the podcast was born. So now I want to talk about the identity factor because that is a huge part of why I started this podcast, as I was trying to sift through who I was, not being Nicole Nalepa on the news. So, more than 15 years, I was in a career that I knew what my purpose was. I had a clear professional identity. I had routine and external structure, something that I'm still struggling with not having right now, leaving the house. And that's another story. I had something that used my curiosity and my communication skills when I worked in the news. I had a visible role that people immediately understood right away. And I had a sense of what I was doing and what I was working towards for so long. So when that is no more, you can feel very lost. And that unexpected area of feeling like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? It's scary. Again, there's like this grief that's tied to it also. But also, I didn't want to wallow in it too long because there was this opportunity at the same time. And I say this like 9 times out of 10, I feel, in every episode, because so many of the guests come on and say, I was so fearful of this, or I was so scared. And whenever I hear that, I can really connect with that because every single big decision I've ever made in my life or goal that I've chased, I was always so scared of. So my favorite quote is, if your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough. Favorite quote ever. And I live by that because I am scared every day of going out and doing something that is not part of the plan that I thought I had. There is no clear-cut path because in any day, something could happen unexpectedly and it will all go away. And that's what happened to me. And I'm realizing that it was actually like the best thing that could have happened to me. I needed a fresh start so I could kind of recalibrate and get back on a path probably that I always wanted to do, but I was hiding in that fear and never acted on it. And I think that my years in the news really prepped me and primed me for this next chapter. So again, no hard feelings. I am so grateful for every moment I've had in my career thus far. Now it's just, again, a new chapter, a new beginning in which I'm just doing it on my own right now. And it's all coming from here because I can do it that way. And it's refreshing and it's scary and it's exciting and it just opens the door to like so much more. And I remember when I downshifted my hours last year, 2 years ago. So my typical morning routine being on a morning show is you would get up around 2 o'clock probably because I had to be in for 3:30. And I was slow waking up in the morning. We have to do our hair, we have to do our makeup, figure out what you're going to wear for the day. You show up, obviously you're trying to prep yourself with the world and what's going on and read all your scripts. You have to tweak some things sometimes, make it sound more like you're coming from your voice, because those producers are up all hours of the night writing this and working really hard. So, you're trying to work with them as well. Like, what do they need help with if they do? There's breaking news that can come into play and completely derail like everything that was planned from overnight. So it's just a lot of unexpectedness. And again, an environment that I've always thrived in. I thrive in chaos. I can handle it. It's when it's like easy and quiet, that's when I struggle. So, but you're tired, you're exhausted, but I could turn it on. And I realized that I've always been a night owl. Even when I had that old shift, I never went to bed at 6 o'clock like some of my other colleagues did. I wanted to eat dinner with my husband. I wanted to be with my family. And the thing that suffered the most was sleep and self care every day, every day. And then it kind of got to the point where after I started having kids, I realized in the back of my head, like, oh, this is really hard. I don't know how much longer I can do this. But it's almost like if I gave in and stopped doing it, there were three things going on. A, what the hell would I do? Because this is all I've ever known. And I feel like I've worked so hard to do this now. And I should be grateful that I worked this hard to be in the position I'm in. The other big thing is I would like give in and fail. You know what I mean? Because I did see some working moms in that industry get out. And, the cliche is like more time with family, which, side note, is so funny because when I did leave, everyone said, oh, you'll have more time with your kids. And the funny thing is, I mean, yes, while that is true, I would say I'm more awake with my kids, but my kids are both in school now. So I actually had more time with me to get to know myself again, which is, again, I'm so grateful for that time and that gift because I don't think I would have taken that time otherwise. And then the third part is, if I stay in this, maybe more things will come to me. So I'm just going to kind of float here and not color outside the lines and just struggle living in the complicity that I was in. And I feel that whenever I'm like complicit in life, that never serves me and I'm not happy. So it's funny, like when I'm always challenging myself and that's why I would always take on like new projects. Like I had this mom podcast that I had started when I was there at the station. I was like doing a ton of events still and burning out constantly. And by the way, I experienced burnout before I had kids. I know that obviously burnout is a very normal thing after children, but no, I was doing 50 to 70 events, which is literally outside of my work hours when I was getting probably 4 hours of sleep on average. And then when I had kids, I was getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep on average. And that was not sustainable. And when I'm like starting to doze behind the wheel, driving into work at 3 a.m, that was when I said to myself, I don't think I can do this right now. And maybe I never said I can't do it ever, just right now. So I was so grateful. I downshifted my hours. I was working 9 to 4, which is not normal news hours, but my gosh, my bosses were so incredibly understanding. And I love them forever for that. And they were like, we will figure it out. And we did for a time. And I got to have a taste of like what it was like to kind of be normal on these normal hours. Still having my foot in an industry and in a job where it's like not normal, if you will. So that was really nice. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, like this is great. But I think that even then, I was probably still playing it safe. And I still had to be on all the time and things suffer sometimes, I was not always present at home. But again, sometimes chapters end not the way that you planned. Sometimes they end the way that you planned. But I think it doesn't matter how it ends. I think the point is it matters how you begin again. And that's why I started this podcast. And I think also I knew I had something to say. I just didn't yet know what shape it was supposed to take. But again, I love podcasts. That's long form conversation. You can really get to learn and talk with someone for a little while. So, and while I was trying to figure out what came next professionally during that time, I was also wrestling with a much bigger question. And that was, who was I allowed to become now? And my husband and I joke around about this, but that's where that unnewsing myself comes from, you know? While I still felt like I was being myself on air, there are certain things that I can I can dress a certain way, I can put my cartilage earring back in and not feel weird about it. There are little things that I'm like, that is me all along. And I had to kind of strip some of that away to fit the mold of the career that I created for myself. And I think that now there's a bigger lesson there in general. And I hope my kids pick up on this or look back someday like, oh, wow, like mom did that for a while. And then she got out of it and then she really found herself. And I think that I see so many people who are struggling with that and they are unhappy. And it doesn't mean that they're unhappy with their relationship they're in. It doesn't mean that they're unhappy by being a parent or, having a certain lane that they chose. But it's like there's a part of them that they know is missing. And I feel like that part is becoming whole again in me. So yes, I am genuinely grateful to have more time with my children and not be falling asleep reading a book to them at 4:00. I'm grateful to sit down at dinner and not be stressed out about, oh, what time am I going to be falling asleep tonight? Because melatonin doesn't work and I can't shut my brain off. I'm grateful that I can pivot and if they're sick from school, I can go pick them up and snuggle with them at home. Um, There are so many parts that I'm grateful for. And I'm grateful for this time and space to explore where this is all going to go. But it doesn't mean I don't struggle. It doesn't mean my kids are not hard at times and I'm really struggling with that. It doesn't mean that I struggle still with self-care and getting to bed at a reasonable time because I'm working now with this stuff at night. There are parts that you still struggle with. It doesn't mean that things are perfect. It just means that, there are little things like waking up with my kids in the morning, taking them to school. I never did that. I never knew what that was like. Yes, they can be hard sometimes, but those tiny little things that, maybe sometimes we take for granted, right? If we do have a normal shift in a textbook job, those little things, I'm like, wow, I never had this, and now I do, and I am just in it. I think the season I'm in now is, I want a professional life, but I don't want one that requires giving up the parts of family life that I've only recently been able to experience more fully. And starting a podcast created that flexibility. But it didn't magically create balance. I'm often building this podcast around school schedules, childcare. Summer breaks have been really hard. So yeah, there are parts that are still hard. Don't get me wrong. Just because I'm not doing what I used to do, it doesn't mean everything is easy and there are no problems. But I think that wanting meaningful work sometimes makes people feel guilty. In particular, I'm probably speaking to all you moms out there, and you should not feel guilty. And I didn't want my next chapter to be returning to the exact life that I had before, even though I knew what that looked like. And even though it was scary to not return to that exact life, I also was not ready to put away the parts of me that wanted to create and contribute and to build something meaningful. So once I admitted that both of those things were true and that I wanted to be present and I still wanted more for myself, I started thinking about the part of my old career that I genuinely missed, hence the conversation, and being able to go deeper. So I asked this question at the end of every episode with all of my guests, and I love their answers. And what I love too is sometimes this answer comes before I even ask it. People love the title Mostly Together. So what does mostly together mean to me? You can be accomplished and uncertain. You can still be healing and you can have hard days. That means that you can make a brave decision and then question it afterwards. That means that you can love your life and you could still want to change parts of it. That means that you can share what you've learned without pretending that you've mastered it. And by the way, the more that you pretend and put out there when it's really not you or not parts of you, that is not only a disservice to yourself, but it's a disservice to other people. So what is the show not? It is not celebrating chaos for the sake of chaos. It is not glorifying burnout. It is not pretending that everything's funny when it is painful. And it's not offering a formula for getting life right. There is no such thing. And each and every one of us are so unique. And one way does not always apply to another person. We got to stop comparing ourselves. It's about telling the truth when there are still loose ends and there are still those messy middles. That is what the show is about. And I didn't want a show where people came on after the hard season was over and then delivered a perfectly packaged lesson. I wanted to understand what it felt like while they were living through that change, or what they can see now that they could not see then. There's always something that we can learn from one another. But what I did not fully expect was how much I would personally need these conversations that followed. And I'm realizing that common through line of why I created the show, and how it really is connecting this common theme of how we're not all perfect. So, hey, a pause is not the same as disappearing, everyone. That is a lesson I have learned. Let's go over some really quick lessons, a little rundown. All right, lesson 1, a pause is not the same as disappearing. Lesson 2, constantly taking care of everyone else is not proof that you're okay. So many people are functioning at such a very high level while quietly running on empty. And I did that for most of my life. And I know how easy it is to mistake the functioning for thriving. Lesson 3, reinvention rarely begins when you feel ready. I repeat, reinvention rarely begins when you feel ready. Okay? Most people do not make a major change without complete confidence. And they make that next decision that I'm learning through all these guests with the information and the courage that they have at the time. So that's what we have to tap into, the courage and information. You can do it. And also, I want to say, I wish I could tell you that creating this show answered all of the questions that I have, but it hasn't. So what am I still figuring out right now? I'm still figuring out what this podcast is becoming in a way, how to grow it sustainably, and reach the people that really need it and want to more of it. How it fits into my larger professional life. But I keep returning to the same thing. I feel like these conversations feel meaningful, and I feel like building something meaningful rarely comes with a map. You have to just show up and do it every day. And I think my kids are home. So, in closing, that is what I want this show to be. It's not a place where people come to prove that they have conquered every hard thing, they've figured it out. It's a place where we can talk honestly about what changes us, about the identities that we outgrow, about the plans that fall apart, and about the parts of ourselves that we're trying to recover, and the new parts that we're still getting to know. And I want Mostly Together to make room for the woman who is proud of what she has built, but knows that she's not finished. The mother who loves her family deeply and still wants something that belongs to her. And the person whose life looks good on paper, but still feels different on the inside. And I want to make room for the fact that I am that person too. And I'm still learning how to build a career that fits the life I have now. So I keep returning back to this thing, that these conversations are meaningful, and building something meaningful rarely comes with the map. And when you're doing something meaningful and intentional, and intentionality has really been the word I feel like I've been leaning into since I got out of the news. You can't go wrong. You're doing it. You're being yourself. You're putting good out there. There's nothing wrong with that. And the world needs, I think, more of that. Right? So, I'm not recording this episode from the other side of reinvention at all. I am recording it from the middle of it. And that's what I want this show to be. And I also want Mostly Together to make room for the person who is proud of what they have built, but knows that they're not finished. That is huge. And some days I feel grounded and clear. Some days I drink the same cup of coffee for the entire day, and I've reheated it 5 million times in the microwave, and I'm wondering, what am I doing? But most days it's a little bit of both. I do not have all the answers, nor do any of my guests, but that's what makes this conversation so meaningful, is we're all figuring it out together at the same time. So thanks for being here and coming along for the ride here on Mostly Together, and I'll see you next week. All right, that wraps up another episode of Mostly Together. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope something in today's conversation stayed with you. Remember, new episodes come out every week, so hit subscribe wherever you're listening. And you can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Our channel is @MostlyTogetherPod, and that's actually the same handle where you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Lots of content there. And you can go on our website, mostlytogetherpod.com. We have a complete backlog of all the episodes, so make sure to check all of that out. Take what you need, leave the rest, and I'll see you next week.